So what's going on, guys? So for part three of the presentation, we're going to be going over some of the final elements of the monetization scheme for Lords Mobile. So with the previous presentation, I was going over more of the introductory to some of the monetization schemes, and there's so many, and Lords Mobile does it so effectively that it's sort of it's you're taken back by how many different ways that they can implement it. So with today, we'll go straight into the monetization scheme, the slot machines. So someone who plays Lord Mobile, the first thing they'd probably tell me is, "Hey, there aren't slot machines in the game. What are you talking about? There are one, but there's not very many slot machines." What creators do that's very creative is that they implement games of chance in the game to make it look like it's not a game of chance when it in fact is. So in the end, anything that has a set chance where of they control the rate at which you receive an item is a form of slot machine. Because slot machines, while you go to the casino and you play them and you see that, oh, you know what, there's only I can see exactly where the 3 7s are. So, it's a game, not a game of chance. I can actually win it by pulling the slot handle. What they're in fact doing is it's not a skill-based game. What they're doing is they're controlling the rate at which you receive the jackpots, or receive items. So in effect, it is all slot machines, it is all lotteries. So Labyrinth is one of such forms where in the game you sort of spend these items that are achieved in game, but to any extent you have to get them through paying real world money. And the Labyrinth is something where you spend 100 of these gems and you get a random item. So it may not seem like it's a lottery, but in effect, they set the odds for when you get the jackpots, for when you don't get the jackpots. And otherwise, you get smaller items if you don't win the jackpot, thereby encouraging players to they're sort of getting small returns of dopamine that they feel good about getting the items, when in fact in the end they just want the jackpot. But by getting small items in the meantime, it's still reinforcing that need for gambling. So that's what gambling and lotteries do very effectively, is that it's not enough just to have the jackpot, but if you have items that players are receiving in the meantime, it sort of feels like they're still building towards something as opposed to it being sunk cost. So Kingdom Tycoon is another form where you roll a die in the game, you move along the board, and you receive items. So on the board, there are the gemming goblins, which are the equivalent of the jackpots, but you never land on them. This is a good example of it's a slot machine in the end. It's a monopoly lottery. The reason why it is because a roll of the dice is random from 1 to 6. But on the board, they specifically make it so that you don't land on the rare items without a certain frequency. So they're controlling the odds of the dice roll. So it is not, therefore, it's not even random. They're controlling the odds. So it is a slot machine. And every so often, Lords Mobile, shown in the bottom figure, has sort of promotions for real world items. So things like Slots of Fortune, Roll the Dice to Win, they're all these lottery based type games. So there's a slot, there's a rolling the dice, there's a spin the wheel. And not only that, but these particular games need coins that are obtained through spending. So it's actually a paywall within a paywall. So hey, you want the chance to win a Samsung Galaxy or an Amazon $1,000 gift card. You have to spend money in the game for in-game items through the cash shop to get coins, and you spend these coins in a second form of gambling in order for a chance to win these items. And as you can imagine, because these are items that are in the real world, Lords Mobile knows for a fact that $1,000 gift card for Amazon, on average, a player will need to spend, say, something like $5,000 to $6,000 for the chance to get that item, and they're controlling those odds. So for a player, they feel like they're getting something. Lords Mobile is, celebrating. I don't know, in this figure, some sort of Chinese New Year or something like that. But they're celebrating players by giving real world items out. But in order for a chance to win those, again, they're controlling the odds. So it's not a matter of skill. What they're in fact doing is getting you to spend $6,000 for a phone that costs $1,000. And players feel like it's worth it because they're also buying items in the game, and they're going to do that otherwise, right? So odds of receiving early gifts are lower than the cost of gambling. We know that. Lords Mobile wouldn't give a $1,000 gift card if it costs $999 of in-game item to get it. Additionally, players receive in-game items to obfuscate sunk cost. The idea is that, like I was saying about the lottery, you have to give them items in the meantime to make them feel like they're building towards something and they're still getting something in the meantime. But the items are all in-game items. So while you want that Amazon gift card, in fact, you're getting items that are meaningless. They're speed ups, they're travel boosts, they're resources. Lords Mobile can create as many as they want, but what they can't do is create more phones and create Amazon. That actually costs them something. So they use various obfuscation techniques for that. In-game events. Some in-game events require player guilds to participate. To do well, you purchase shop items, spend gems. The idea is that in-game items are in-game events. Um, your whole guild gets items, and your whole guild gets items when each player within the guild is contributing. So Guild Fest being the best example, and things like Hell events as well. But in order to achieve and do very well in those events, they all require high levels of spending. So there's in the Guild Fest, there's an example of completing a certain number of Hell events in a certain period of time. To compete and do well in these Hell events, in order to get the progression required to complete them, you need to spend gems, and purchase shop items. So to do well in the in-game events, they're also putting that softly behind a paywall. Other things, which is not directly related to monetization, is that is as a game, what they want to do is hook you onto it. They want you to come back every single day and to have that feeling of that your castle's being attacked and that there's others progressing. So what they need to do is find ways for you to come onto the game and see the items that you could purchase. So things like login bonuses just encourage people to open up the game once a day and to see the cash shop as it pops up. That's the first thing it does is the cash shop pops up. Free daily box shop and cash shop. So if you don't normally go to the cash shop because you're a free to player, okay, we'll put a free box in there with some resources just so you can see the items. So, it's there. Guild participation is very important. So in higher tier guilds, everybody has to participate, right? And the leaders of the guilds can see who participates and who doesn't. So very often, if you're inactive for 1 or 2 days, you're kicked from the guild. So even Lords Mobile is reinforcing the idea that you should come to the game and you should play and you should do this, because if you don't participate to an extent, guilds will kick for inactivity. And they also have subscription options, which is sort of a little outrageous. The fact that they can have all these other forms of monetization and they're going to add a subscription. And subscriptions are just something where, they sort of got you in the bag. If you feel like you have to spend every month, that is one of the worst things for people. It takes advantage of people's needs for progression, is that you sort of get them hooked. It's one thing to purchase a cup of coffee one a day, or to purchase a coffee every so often when you want it. But if a Tim Hortons or a McDonald's can get you to come in and for that to be your morning regime is to buy that morning cup of coffee, then they got you, because they got you invested for a long period of time. So subscriptions are their ways of doing that through weekly or monthly subscription options. This is one of the more nefarious forms of monetization schemes, which is a cashback mechanism. What this does is Lords Mobile has an agreement with Huawei App Gallery. It provides cash back for purchases made in game, and for cash back, I have seen quotes that say cash back, but you actually don't get cash. So that's just them being mischievous. You actually get in-game credit. That's an important thing. So for example, normally if you spend $1 USD, you get $1 of in-game worth. What they sort of do is that if you go through Huawei App Gallery and you spend through their platform, if you spend $1 in game or you spend $1 in real life, you get $1.50 of in-game worth. And let me just say, because the exchange rate, because the in-game worth, there is no worth, right? Gems and items are created out of thin air. You are not, in fact, getting anything different. They're just giving you discounts on the items. So the base rate is 50%. You spend $1, you get $1.50. And they have something else where you get additional 25% if you spend more than 1,000 euros per month. So I had mentioned the weekly and the monthly forms of subscription options. What they really want to do is encourage those players that are big spenders and feel like they need to be engaged in the game to spend per month. And how can they do that? They give you discounts. So they say, hey, you spend on average 1,000 per month. We're going to give you a little bit of a discount on what you spend. So the base rate is 50%, but it increases to 25% if you spend more than 1,000 euros per month. And let me just say, 1,000 euros per month at 12,000 a year, that is extremely expensive, very high level of spending and engagement in a game if you're spending that much per year. Um, and again, but you get 75% with 50 plus 25 as the form of cash back. So you spend $1, you will get $1.75 of in-game worth. It's very, I shouldn't say dollar because you're getting $1.75 of in-game worth, right? There is no dollar equivalent. So it promotes dedicated spending, the idea that you're a 12,000 euro per year spender for progress in a mobile game, and pretty much reduces the cost of items by 33 to 43%. One person might say, okay, well, you're spending $1, you're getting 175% back. How is that 43%? Well, when you think about it, for every dollar you spend, if you get $1 of 75 of in-game worth back, you're in fact getting you're not getting 50% back. So if you spend $1 and you get $2 of in-game worth, then in fact everything that you spend is 50% off, right? So that's one of the other mischievous things they do, is that you see 75% cash back, you think you're getting 75% of your cash back, when in fact all you're doing is you're just getting discounts. If you break it down, discounts on the gems that are offered to you. So it's between 33 to 43%, 43% being if you spend over 12,000 euros per month. And one of the reasons why the 12,000 euro per year is so attractive to players is because those players that are engaged in the platform, in the game, they become continue spenders. And to achieve progress in the end game, you need to meet a certain requirement for spending in order to compete at all. So endgame content requires a constant investment to maintain armies and familiars. So you cannot compete in game if you are not having the slow, steady investment. And what game developers like to do is that, let's just say, to achieve the game progression in the game, you need to spend on average 800 euros per month. Well, for example, in the Huawei app gallery, if you spend over 1,000, you get more cash back. So that incentivizes some players, if they spend around $600, $700, $800, to spend $1,000 just for that cash back. So things like Superstore, the grocery store, does something similar where, if you spend over $250, you're getting an item, like, I don't know, you're sort of getting an item that has a $25 worth. Therefore, if they notice that the average person coming into their store spends $200, they're willing to spend that extra $50 to go up to $250 on items that maybe they don't need in order to get that free item, which is an item they don't need. So in this game, all the items that you're getting, you don't need, and you're spending on items that you don't need, but they have to reinforce the fact that you need it in order to compete. So because it requires a constant investment, through the ways that players deplete the armies of other players and capture their heroes. So you're spending money and you're sort of building your might through the army that you build, and you're capturing other players. But other players are competing with you and destroying your armies. So replenishment requires exponentially more time and resources as you get higher up. So at higher tiered levels, if you take a drastic loss in your army might, and you need to, in terms of the time and monetary investment, build up your troops again, it requires exponentially more resources to go back. So to compete in the end game, you absolutely cannot be a free-to-player. You need to spend money to replenish back, and you replenish back to build armies to destroy others' armies. So what it actually does is, if we look on the figure on the right, is you build armies at the very top, and other players through PvP deplete it. From replenishing armies, you need investment through Lords Mobile in order to build your armies back. But even within the PvP aspect on the right, what you notice is that even the players that are attacking you are doing the same thing. And the players that are there are attacking and replenishing armies and doing the same thing. So at every stage of the step, Lords Mobile is getting a piece of that pie. So if to compete at endgame, if it costs, let's just say, $1,000 to replenish, build armies, and to just meet basic progression of endgame content, what they're in fact doing is, for every single player that does that, they're taking $1,000 per month from these players, because you can't compete otherwise. And it requires exponentially more time and resources. That's very important, is that the game is going to always come out with higher tiered troops and higher tiered familiars, and it's going to require exponentially more of an spending in order to do that. So right now, if it requires $1,000 a month to maintain your armies and familiars to compete with other players. If they came out with a higher tier troop and higher tiered familiars, the time investment and monetary investment for that can go from $1,000 a month to $2,000 a month. And those players that were spending 1,000 would feel compelled to spend 2,000 in order to compete on the same level as they did before. So that's why Lords Mobile is always setting that upper limit of spending higher and higher, and that monthly spending higher and higher, because those that are invested in the game today will not quit if it means spending $400 more than they were if it was 1,000, because people can sort of, the fact that they're spending this much already can't conceptualize the cost of what they're doing by spending so much in the game. They're sort of caught in the environment and the need for accomplishment in this game. So that's something that Lords Mobile does. That's very interesting. And again, because players are building armies and replenishing it, players are in effect exhausting other players' investment in the game. So you can sort of imagine that if you spend $1,000 to build your army over the course of a month, another player can bring it down, right? So it's not so much if you're free to player, you're just losing progress, which is the case in any game. You have progression as a player. You die, you lose experience. You're losing progression. It feels terrible because you spent hours to get that progression. But in this game, because you're at higher tier and you require investment, you're exhausting each other's investment, monetary investing in the game. So there's more of a real life hit when you conceptualize that. So you're spending 1,000 to deplete another player's 1,000, but they're spending 1,000 to deplete yours. And every single time that happens, Lords Mobile gets some. You have to pay Lords Mobile in order to do that. So players are, in effect, degrading their own investment in the game just based on how the game functions. Not through PvE content, but through PvP content. They're exhausting each other's resources. So as a final monetization, because we're approaching 17 minutes, and I told myself I wasn't going to be anything longer than 12, but here it is. Lords Mobile has a fantastic endgame monetization scheme as a sort of an academic exercise. They do it extremely well in terms of offering those incentives, and that's what it is. If you offer the incentives, players will not be able to conceptualize the cost of what they're doing, and they'll play. And it also reinforces high-level competitive play and upper limit of expenditure. So always coming up with more competitive, higher tier troops will increase the exponentiality of what players pay. If they're already feeling like they're paying per month, it's not so much to spend a little more. Again, in my first presentation, I'd mentioned that spending $0 to $5 is much more difficult than these players that are spending 1,000 to 1,400. So if it's that easy, all Lords Mobile needs to do is release more content in order to encourage players. So the game employs every monetization you can think of to shield costs from players. Gems, the conversion from US dollars to gems. There is no equivalent. Players don't realize the cost of what they're doing. Loot boxes, again, people don't understand the odds of what they're doing, so they'll pay until they get the item. First purchase bonuses, slot machines, normalization within players. That it's normal to spend $10-15. So why don't you do it too? The normalization is very important. And finally, endgame content requires a steady expenditure to maintain armies and attack others, thereby creating a reinforcing loop that is facilitated by monthly cashback schemes. So that is something that only in these sorts of games can incentivize those players to feel like they're engaged and have to spend per month in order to get their progression. And as new content comes out, it'll just have a higher limit of expenditure, and players will just feel like, because they've engaged years, because they've competed years in the game, that their guild mates are all spending this. If they want to compete on the same level, they have to spend this. It just encourages them to play more, and players are in effect draining each other's monetary in real life investment. So I think that's the final one for the presentation. With that, signing off, and thanks for joining me. See you next time.